everyone, I'm Angela and welcome back to my channel. We are here at Trinity University. It's the second day of the conference of the British Association for the Study of Religions, and I'm extremely honored to have here as a guest on my channel and to interview Bettina Schmidt. Bettina is an anthropologist and professor in religious studies at University of Wales, Trinity, St. David. She has done an extensive amount of research and fieldwork in Brazil with ecstatic religions and spirit possession. So I'm really happy to have you here on my channel today.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, thank you. I also have to mention that Bettina is the president of the British Association for the Study of Religions, so I imagine that for her it's been quite a busy conference, hasn't it?
But also a pleasure. It's always nice to meet colleagues, some of them I see only at conferences, so I'm always pleased to come to our annual conference of the British Association Study of Religions.
I have two books by Bettina here with me, but of course many more will be referenced in the info box to this video, so check out the info box for all the references and Bettina's publication. So there are a few questions that I'd like to ask you. So the first one is that basically I read in this book, Spirits and Trance in Brazil, that one of your methodology is to use a deictic approach and the idea of provincializing the understanding of religious experience. So could you explain us what this is and how you came up with this idea?
Well, I did research in Brazil in 2010 in different religious communities. I attended ceremonies and interviewed people in Candomblé, which is an Afro-Brazilian religion, in Umbanda, another Afro-Brazilian religion, in Spiritism, Kardecism. I also spoke with people involved in Christian denominations, including Pentecostalism, and in order to gather their understanding of what happened when they are speaking, channeling spirits of the ancestors, or when they are embodying deities from Africa, or when they are enriched by the Holy Spirit, and what does it mean for these people to experience this very intense religious phenomena. And so I interviewed people, I attended ceremonies and spoke with colleagues, I read a lot of books, and I struggled finding a way to speak about it from an academic point of view. And then, I think it was a year after I came back from the field, I attended a conference in Hungary on spirit possession. And I spoke about the phenomena that some Kardecists, spiritists, don't want to use the term spirit possession or any other terms linked to it. And I spoke about a spiritist arguing, oh, we are not possessed, but then 5 minutes later spoke about channeling his a guardian angel. And then a colleague, Michael Lambek, mentioned afterwards in a discussion that perhaps the concept of deictic would be quite a useful way to look into it further. So I got home and I then ordered the book he mentioned, where he wrote an article about spiritualizing God, ? The term deictic suddenly made sense to me. It's to explain, deictic comes from linguistic studies. So it refers to a term which we really understand only in the context. For instance, the term here or there can have different meanings. It can have a meaning of here at Leeds, Trinity, here in the UK, here in Europe. And so it has a range of meanings, and we understand only what I mean when I say I'm here in the wider context. And the same is also applied in aspects of religion, aspects of God, aspects of religious experience, including also spirit possession. The meaning we attach to the word can only be understood within the context. And this allowed me to value the meaning the believers, the practitioners attach to the term. I do not need to make decision about this is right, this is wrong, this is the correct version to do it, and this is the incorrect version, because everything is correct. Everything has value. It always depends on the meaning attached to it by the practitioners, by the believers. And therefore I use therefore the term or the phrase deictic as a framework to demonstrate that religious phenomena, religious experience, or trance, or spirit possession, or the whole concept of deity and spirits can have a range of meanings, and there is not a good or bad meaning. Meaning makes sense to the group, to the believers.
That's really interesting. So basically, something that is understood from a deictic point of view means that it's context sensitive,
yes,
but also sensitive to the personal belief system of the individual that you are studying.
Absolutely, and so you need to learn quite a lot. You need to understand the context. The context does not mean only the religious context or the cultural context, but also the social context. So when we look therefore at the meaning of context within the discussion of deictic, we have to see the wide range of context. It's not just the religious context or the cultural context, it's also the social context and the historical context. Looking at, for instance, spirit possession in Candomblé in the 1930s, there was an American anthropologist, Ruth Landis, who wrote a book on City of Women, she called it, and had quite a feminist interpretation of Candomblé communities in Salvador de Bahia. Her interpretation made sense in her time period, in the 1930s, where Brazil was very different from Brazil today. And therefore, when we use the term deictic, or we look at phenomena from a deictic point of view, we have to keep all these different contexts into
consideration.
We have to take all these different contexts into consideration: gender, social, historical, religious, and cultural framework.
Do you think that that this kind of approach might present issues in terms of generalizing the definition of something? I mean, if you are studying, for example, spirit possession in Brazil, and you are using a deictic approach which provincializes somehow the religious experience, and it is extremely sensitive to the context and the personal belief system, does it mean that it is not possible to have a general understanding of spirit possession in Brazil? Do you necessarily need to relate it to one specific context which is quite small, and one specific belief system which might relate to just one person or just one group of people?
This is a very good question. When I wrote the book, I had in mind really showing the diversity of the definition of spirit possession and the way it is used. However, since then I looked much more wider in the wider area of religious experience, and I realized, also coming back to the concept of trance or concept of spirit possession, that we also have to keep in mind global influences. So I'm at the moment playing a little bit with the term Glocalise. Glocalise, which shows that we have local influences but also global phenomena. Because when we look at spirit possession or trance, we also have to keep in mind wider influences, impacts into understanding of concepts. we cannot look at spirit possession without also having in mind all the negative stereotypes we have to address when we do research on spirit possession. And therefore, while when I wrote the book, I had in mind really the diversity of local expression, that even within one country such as Brazil, the understanding is quite diverse. I come to an understanding that nonetheless we have to look wider, we have to open our viewpoint and also investigate the impact of global influences in definition. The practitioners in Brazil, in various different communities, they all hate the term spirit possession. They don't use the term spirit possession.
But they do spirit possession.
They practice something and they use other terms. They use incorporation or mediumship.
So it's just the label,
yeah,
that's
the label, yes. And the label is negative because of the global influences, because of the negative picture with the crazy possessed women. And in reality, it is a totally normal experience for them, but they use other terms. However, when we write about it in an academic term, we usually translate terms not only into English, but also into academic phrases. And the term spirit possession is quite a well-known term, such as shamanism, your own research area. And therefore, we are using terms which we then fill with different meanings. And on the one hand, we have to make sure that we are using the same term so that we can start comparing issues and comparing experience. But we also may have to make sure that the people we write about are happy with the way we write about them.
Yeah, but sometimes there is a discrepancy between what people believe and what they actually do.
Yeah.
At least that's what I'm experiencing in my research. So, for example, there might be informants that could not be happy with the words I use because they have a certain connotation attached to that specific word, but it's actually their understanding of that word is not. It's just loaded with personal or cultural negative connotations, which are not really linked with the academic. I mean, the academic use of that word is not really loaded with that kind of connotations. So it's like sometimes there's a discrepancy between the understanding that academics have of certain words and the understanding that the practitioners have of certain words. And so that can create a bit of a conflict between the researcher and the researched, because you don't know whether to be academically accurate or to respond to the needs of your informants and what your informants might like.
Yeah. There is a huge discrepancy between people experiencing religious experience, people explaining religious experience. However, Anne Taves even makes the point that there's a third group we also have to investigate. Referring to William James, she speaks about the people who are the mediators, people who write books about their experience, who argue that what they're writing is also a type of science, a type of study, and we have to take it seriously. We cannot just say, oh, this is belief, this is faith. No, this is for them a way to communicate about their belief system. So it's even more complicated. It's not just one group and another group, but it's also a third group who describe their belief as for instance, Spiritism. Spiritists describe what they are doing as communication with the spirits of ancestors. For them, it's nothing to do with belief or faith. Some of them are atheists, but they communicate with the spirits.
That's very interesting, and I also find it to be true in my own research in Italy. So that seems to be a common thing among these kind of practices, which is also interesting in and of itself. So the second question that I'd like to ask you is, what definition would you give of shamanism? what is, in your opinion, the right or the closest to the right definition of shamanism?
Well, I always argue there is not a right definition, there are always different ones. When I was a student, we looked at shamanism from Mircea Eliade's point of view. And we defined shamanism as involved with spirit guides and sending the soul up to a different level and in order to find out what the problem of the patient is, and then coming back and then communicating the solution to the patient. This, to a certain degree, made sense in the research area of Mircea Eliade and so Asia. In South America, we are applying the term shamanism also on indigenous belief system, where shamanism again is usually there's a shaman in a community who takes the role as a healer, as a doctor, in order to communicate with their ancestors. But the communication is sometimes in a different way. They take ayahuasca, for instance. They initiate the journey with certain ingredients. And nowadays we also apply the term shamanism on this, on these experiences. So the term shamanism, from a very limited definition 50 years ago by Mircea Eliade, has widened. It's no longer just applied to Siberia or to Asia, Central Asia, but to various different phenomena. And a colleague, David Wilson, who wrote his PhD in Edinburgh, also applies it to spiritualism. I had a discussion with him a couple of years ago when I organized a small conference on spirit possession and trance, where he presented his ideas. At that time, it was before I did my own research in Brazil. I did some study on spiritism in Puerto Rico for my own PhD many years ago, and I was not convinced at that time that the application of the term shamanism on spiritualist healers makes sense. However, since then, and doing my research in Brazil and doing a lot of interviews with spiritist and Brazilian Kardecists and spiritists, I got to the understanding that David's application of the term made sense, because this is also what they are doing in their communication, a form of healing by channeling the spirit, for instance, of a doctor. They can heal the patients without touching them, and therefore this is also a form, what they are doing, a form of shamanism. And therefore I have come now to a wider understanding of shamanism. However, the question was, what is shamanism? How can I define it? And therefore my definition, but it's really an ad hoc definition, would be that a shaman, and so shamanism is an experience around one person shaman. It can be a male or female, which then this person gains special powers via the interaction with the other world, within our outer world. It can be the world of ancestors, can be a world of spirits, animal spirits, spirits of nature, saints, and so it can be various different entities. But they gain powers which then, like channeling through them, in order to heal.
Do they need to be aware that they are channeling this power, or can it happen even without the person acknowledging that they are in this kind of communication? Because, for example, in Italy there are healers that use the prayers and the powers of the saints, but they are not always aware of what they're doing, so it is just kind of automatic. It's been taught to them from their grandparents, and they do it as part of a tradition, and not always they are aware that they are communicating with a non-ordinary reality. Sometimes it's just part of their lineage. So do you think it is necessary for them to acknowledge that they are diving into this non-ordinary reality from?
No, I think it's same as with my explanation about spirit possession. I think from an academic point of view, we use and apply academic terms on experience in order to categorize them, to analyze them. But the practitioner, they use other ways to speak about it. And even the Brazilian spiritists, usually when it happened the first couple of times, they are not even aware what they are doing. And only then, when they are then involved in a community and learn to speak about it, they suddenly find terms to express what they are doing. But this is then more or less taught by a community. They have an experience, they don't understand the experience, and then they, sometimes family members or a neighbor or a friend tells them, oh, you need to speak with this and this person. Who can, this person can explain what you are going through. And suddenly they find terms to express what they are doing. But without this community, they would find perhaps different terms to speak about it.
Or no terms at all.
Or no terms.
So basically the experience comes first, and the definition comes later, and it may not come at all in some cases.
Absolutely.
Because the focus really in shamanism is the experience. It's just as scholars that we have to rack our brains to, to understand.
And to write books about it.
And then to write other books to say, well, actually, there are other things to take into consideration. So it's really a never-ending cycle, but it is a fun one because
it's true.
It means that we know more and more things and we discover more and more things. And also the last question would be, what has your experience in Brazil taught you about shamanism? Shamanism in general, besides the Brazilian context.
Well, I must admit, I learned through my research in Brazil to be perhaps more open-minded. I did research on ecstatic religion before. My PhD was on Puerto Rico and Spiritism and Santeria. Then I did research in New York City among immigrant communities, including Haitian Voodoo and Chango from Trinidad and Tobago. And I was fascinated by the performance, by the spectacle of the performance. But my engagement in Brazil with the people and my interviews with them really opened my mind of how complex this experience is and how diverse the experience is, but also how enriched people felt afterwards. And I really started, I'm still not sure that I fully understand what they're going through because I haven't had the experience myself, but I started to acknowledge and to understand what it meant for them to channel spirit of a doctor or to embody the African deity. This is a very powerful experience, and it can be initiated like many indigenous shamans do in the Amazon by taking ayahuasca or other. This can be initiated by drum music. It can be also happen just on the moment, and I felt this is a very powerful experience, and I started to realize the power of experience.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So you think that what your experience in Brazil taught you about shamanism in general is to focus more on the experience itself, if I'm understanding correctly what you're saying?
Yes, and that we really need to engage with the shaman. That we need to understand. Often the research often on shamanism is research about the patients who go to a shaman, to consult with a shaman. But I think what we also need to do is to work with the shaman themselves and understand what they experience, what they see, the vision, the color, these ideas which pops into their head by not moving at all, lying just on the ground. Or this is, I think, what is fascinating and should be studied much more.
Do you think we are going towards a new way of defining shamanism or religious experiences in general in religious studies?
Yes, definitely. Shamanism, I think, has widened in the last couple of years extensively. On the one side, of course, we have the movement with Michael Harner and the neo-shamanism, but I think we have now a wide understanding of the diversity of shamanism in general. But with religious experience, we also have a wider understanding of religious experience. I'm also the director of the Religious Experience Research Center at the university, which is linked to Alistair Hardy. And we have now also an understanding that it's possible to have religious experience without being religious. Some people use the term religious and spiritual experience, but even some people don't like the term spiritual, and therefore I've used in some publication the term non-ordinary as a way to really express, as an umbrella term, the diversity of this experience. It can be religious, can be spiritual, it can be non-religious, it can be secular, it's non-ordinary. And I think this is what we are starting to realize, that also the study of religion is a study of various different forms of experiences. Spiritual, non-spiritual, secular, atheism, this all is part of study of religion.
That's very interesting. And I quite agree that we are moving towards that direction. So I really thank you, Bettina, for this interview. It was extremely interesting, and I'm sure that even our audience will find it interesting. So thank you again very much for being here on my YouTube channel. And I thank you all for watching this video, and do remember to stay tuned for all the academic fun.